All right, so get this. What if Shakespeare wasn't actually Shakespeare?
Intriguing.
We're diving into a theory that claims Christopher Marlowe, the Elizabethan playwright, might be the true author behind those famous works.
Bold claim.
You shared a YouTube video that really makes you think twice about the bard.
Yeah, this one's a fascinating deep dive.
So let's break it down.
Okay, so the video argues that Marlowe didn't die in 1593, like history says.
Oh, okay.
It claims he actually faked his death to escape some serious trouble and went on to write under a bunch of different pen names,
Really?
with Shakespeare being his most successful cover, supposedly.
Okay, so Marlowe's alive and kicking. Then who's he writing as?
The video seems to think a poet named Michael Drayton was a major alias for him.
Why Drayton?
Well, the timing is definitely suspicious.
How so?
Drayton's career really takes off right after Marlowe supposedly dies.
That's interesting.
Like poof, one poet vanishes and then another one who's suspiciously similar just appears out of nowhere.
But couldn't that just be coincidence?
Sure, it's possible.
Like, maybe Drayton was just waiting for his big break.
Yeah, could.
Or just honing his craft.
Right, but the video suggests it's more than that.
Okay, I'm listening.
It points to Drayton's early works and claims that some of his poems are actually coded messages about Marlowe's, fake death and new life in hiding.
Coded messages, like secret spy stuff?
That's the idea.
Pretty wild.
Right, so what kind of poems are we talking about here?
Exactly. Give me some examples.
Okay, well, there's one called Shepherd's Garland.
Okay.
It was published in 1593, the same year Marlowe supposedly died. And the video interprets this collection as an allegory.
An allegory, like a story with a hidden meaning?
Right, exactly, with the shepherds representing Marlowe and his fellow playwrights.
Interesting.
So they're like lamenting the loss of their friend,
Uh-huh.
but secretly hinting at his continued existence, under a new identity.
So it's like they're speaking in code.
Yeah, kind of.
Publicly mourning Marlowe, but secretly celebrating his survival.
Exactly.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, it's a pretty clever way to communicate with those in the know without raising suspicion from the authorities.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this theory works.
Right.
But is there more to it than just suspicious timing and, these cryptic poems?
Absolutely, there's way more.
Okay, lay it on me.
The video highlights a ton of parallels between Marlowe's known works and those that are attributed to both Drayton and Shakespeare.
Really?
Yeah, and these similarities go way beyond general themes. They actually delve into specific character types,
Wow.
plot devices, and even some recurring phrases that pop up.
Hold on, so you're saying there are like lines and characters that literally pop up in both Marlowe's plays and Shakespeare's?
Yeah, not always word for word,
Okay.
but the resemblance is pretty striking.
Wow, okay. Give me an example.
All right, so one example is the character of Piers Gaveston.
Okay.
So he's a pretty prominent character in Marlowe's play Edward II.
Uh-huh.
And then he appears again in a poem of the same name that was published under Drayton's name in 1594.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, but isn't it possible that Drayton just, admired Marlowe's work
Sure.
and was inspired by it?
Yeah.
I mean, lots of writers draw inspiration from their predecessors.
Definitely, but the video argues that the Gaveston character is too specific, too nuanced, to be just mere inspiration.
Oh.
It suggests that this character actually represents Marlowe himself.
Interesting.
Like a way for him to express his own feelings of persecution and exile, but through, the guise of a historical figure.
So Marlowe is using his writing to send a message
Yeah.
about his own situation, but in a way that's hidden from, the everyday reader.
Exactly. It's like a subtle form of self-expression, a way to communicate his truth without directly revealing his identity.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So this whole thing is starting to feel like a literary puzzle.
It really is.
Is there more to this Gaveston connection?
There's a bit more. So
Yeah.
Gaveston is known for being flamboyant, having a flamboyant personality,
Oh.
and a very close relationship with King Edward II.
Okay.
And the video draws a parallel between that dynamic and Marlowe's own rumored relationships with some powerful men,
Interesting.
suggesting that Gaveston is actually a coded representation of Marlowe's own experiences and desires.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So we've got the timing of Drayton's career,
Right.
these possible coded messages in his poems,
Uh-huh.
and now this Gaveston character who might be a stand-in for Marlowe.
Right.
What other clues does this video dig up?
Oh, plenty more.
Give me one.
Well, remember how I mentioned recurring phrases?
Oh, yeah.
The video points to this, curious connection between Drayton's poem Endymion and Phoebe
Okay.
and Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew.
Okay.
They both feature this prominent sleeker motif.
Wait, sleeper motif, like someone taking a nap?
Yeah, like someone who's sleeping or in a sleep-like state.
Okay, how does that tie into Marlowe faking his death?
So in Drayton's poem, Endymion is cursed to sleep forever. Right, and the video draws a parallel to Marlowe, suggesting that he's also in a state of perpetual sleep, forced to live under this new identity, unable to wake up and reclaim his true self.
So Marlowe is sleeping as Drayton or as Shakespeare?
Maybe both.
Or maybe both. My head's spinning.
That's the beauty of this theory.
It's a lot.
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about these writers and how they're all connected.
It really does.
Yeah.
Okay. Before my brain explodes, let's move on to another piece of this puzzle.
Okay.
I know the video talks about handwriting analysis. What's the deal with that?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I like interesting.
So the video claims that the handwriting in Shakespeare's will is practically identical to the handwriting found in this play called Sir Thomas More.
Okay.
And scholars believe that Marlowe may have had a hand in writing that play.
Wait, you're telling me that the same person who wrote Shakespeare's will also wrote part of a play that Marlowe might have been involved in?
That's what they're saying.
That's a huge coincidence, right?
Well, the video argues that it's more than coincidence.
Okay.
It presents this expert analysis from a paleographer who actually examined both documents and concluded that they were written by the same hand.
Okay, so let's say for a second that Marlowe did fake his death.
Okay.
How on earth would he have managed to sign Shakespeare's will without anyone noticing that it was actually him?
That's a great question.
Right.
And the video doesn't really provide a definitive answer, but it does open up some fascinating possibilities.
Like what?
Well, maybe there were other people involved,
Okay.
like a whole network of individuals who helped Marlowe maintain his secret identity. Or maybe he had become so good at disguising his handwriting that even those closest to him couldn't recognize it.
So many possibilities.
It's really intriguing.
So we've got the poems, the play connections, and now this handwriting evidence. What else does this video throw at us?
Oh, there's a lot more to unpack.
Let's hear.
Well, it introduces us to this, mysterious figure named Francis Mears.
Oh, okay. So another writer in the mix.
Yeah.
What makes this Mears guy so important?
So he was a writer in Elizabethan England,
Uh-huh.
and he wrote a lot about the poets of his day,
Okay.
including Shakespeare.
Okay.
And you guessed it, Drayton.
Oh.
So the video suggests that Mears might have been one of the few people who knew Marlowe's true identity.
Interesting. Was he part of Marlowe's secret club?
It's possible.
Okay.
So he wrote extensively about Drayton, praising his character and his work
Uh-huh.
in a way that seems almost too glowing, for a relatively unknown poet at the time.
Too glowing, like suspiciously complimentary.
Exactly.
Oh,
For instance, he calls Drayton held for a man of virtuous disposition, well-governed carriage, which is almost miraculous among good wits in these declining and corrupt times.
wow. That's high praise.
And he goes on to say that Drayton's work is set on every post to public view.
So if Drayton was actually Marlowe in disguise, those compliments would make a lot more sense, right?
Exactly.
Because Marlowe was known for being a bit of a rebel, right?
Yeah, a bit of a rule breaker.
Yeah.
And Mears is writing this in 1598, which is just a few years after Marlowe supposedly died.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he's praising Drayton for virtues that align much more closely with what we know about Marlowe.
So Mears is like dropping hints, subtly pointing to Drayton as being someone more than meets the eye.
Exactly. It's very subtle.
That's pretty sneaky.
And there's an even stranger detail.
Okay, what is it?
Mears mentions a project of Drayton's called Polyolbion, a massive poem about England.
Mm-hmm.
The strange part is that he mentions it a full 14 years before it was actually published.
Okay, that is strange.
So it's like he had this inside knowledge
Yeah.
about Drayton's work.
Yeah.
That would be impossible unless he was, much closer to him than anyone realized.
Right. Unless, of course, he knew that Drayton was Marlowe
Yeah,
and was aware of the project all along.
that's one possibility.
Yeah.
But, wouldn't other people have noticed if Marlowe was still alive and writing?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, too.
I mean, you'd think someone would have spilled the beans.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest questions surrounding this whole theory.
Yeah.
And the video doesn't have, a concrete answer,
Uh-huh.
but it speculates that Marlowe might have been living a very secluded life.
Okay.
Maybe even traveling abroad to avoid being detected.
It would have been a risky move, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess if you're already faking your own death, you're probably not too worried about taking a few more risks.
Right.
Okay, speaking of risks,
Yeah.
The video throws out a lot of other potential pseudonyms that Marlowe might have used.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the most interesting ones is Thomas Watson.
Okay.
His work shares some striking similarities with Marlowe's.
Right.
And some even claim that there are, coded messages hidden within his poems.
It's possible.
Wait, so we're not just talking about Drayton anymore?
Nope.
There could be a whole team of Marlowes running around Elizabethan England.
That's the implication, yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah, if this theory's true,
Uh-huh.
it means we might have to rethink, like, the entire landscape of Elizabethan literature.
Yeah.
Like, who wrote what?
It makes you question everything.
Exactly.
So how do we know if any of these other potential aliases actually, hold water?
Right.
Are there specific examples that link their work back to Marlowe?
Yeah, the video delves into some specific works attributed to these potential aliases,
Okay.
looking for hidden messages and stylistic similarities,
Uh-huh.
then point back to Marlowe.
Okay.
For example, there's this obscure 1595 essay by W.C.
Okay.
that some believe is actually a plea from Marlowe himself.
A plea. What kind of plea?
So the essay is titled Polymanteia.
Okay.
It's filled with reflections on the nature of poetry and the power of words.
Okay.
And the video argues that the author's voice actually aligns with Marlowe's known beliefs and could be seen as a cry for recognition.
So if this theory's right,
Right.
Marlowe is stuck watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, like in hiding.
Yeah, as other writers take credit for his work.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to imagine that would be pretty frustrating.
Oh, yeah. Very frustrating.
Like to see your own work being celebrated but not being able to claim it as your own.
It would take incredible discipline to do that.
It really makes you wonder what kind of life Marlowe would have led if he hadn't faked his death.
Yeah.
Would he have achieved even greater fame under his own name?
It's possible.
Or would his, controversial views have ultimately led to his downfall?
Who knows?
So many what ifs.
Yeah, that's what makes this theory so compelling.
It really does.
And forces it to reconsider the traditional narrative of Marlowe's life and career and imagine these, like, alternative paths that his life might have taken.
Okay, let's get back to these pseudonyms for a second.
Sure.
We've talked about Drayton
Yeah.
and Watson. And we know Shakespeare is, like, the main one, but are there any others that really stand out?
Well, the video spends some time discussing Robert Greene.
Okay.
He was a contemporary playwright and pamphleteer.
Okay.
And in his 1592 work, Greene's Groat's Worth of Wit, he seems to make this, like, veiled reference to a rival playwright
Okay.
who surpasses him in wit and invention.
So who is this mystery playwright?
Well, the video suggests this could be a subtle jab at Marlowe.
Like a backhanded compliment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Greene seems to acknowledge Marlowe's talent,
Uh-huh.
but he also criticizes his atheistical views, which were, considered quite scandalous at the time.
Right.
So it's like he's both praising and condemning this mystery playwright at the same time.
So maybe Greene was aware of Marlowe's continued existence,
Maybe.
but couldn't directly call him out.
It's possible.
Maybe he feared repercussions if he actually exposed the secret.
Yeah, that's very likely.
It was a dangerous time to be a writer back then, especially if your views didn't align with, the powers that be.
It's like this whole world of Elizabethan literature
Yeah.
is shrouded in this, like, mystery and intrigue. You never know who's really behind the pen.
It really makes you wonder
Yeah.
about all the hidden stories and secrets that we might never know about.
And that's what makes this deep dive so captivating.
It really is.
It's like peeling back these layers of history
Yeah.
and uncovering this hidden truth
Yeah.
that's been buried for centuries.
But even if we accept the possibility that Marlowe might have used pseudonyms, wouldn't there be, like, some record of it somewhere?
You'd think so.
Some piece of evidence that definitively proves he was still alive after 1593?
Well, that's the beauty of this mystery.
Yeah.
The video suggests that if Marlowe was truly committed to this whole deception,
Right.
he would have taken great pains to erase any trace of his existence,
Wow.
leaving behind a trail of misinformation and misdirection.
So it's like he's playing a game of literary hide-and-seek with us,
Kind of, yeah.
daring us to find him.
Exactly. And that's what makes this theory so exciting. It challenges us to think critically,
Uh-huh.
to examine the evidence
Yeah.
and draw our own conclusions.
Right. It's not about just blindly accepting what we're told.
Right.
It's about actually engaging with history in a meaningful and thought-provoking way.
Exactly.
So what other clues does the video present?
Well, it dives into how various writers at the time actually described Shakespeare.
Okay.
And the video claims these descriptions don't really line up with the image of the Stratford businessman that we traditionally associate with the bard.
Interesting. So how did they describe him?
Well, for example, there's this play called The Return from Parnassus.
Okay.
It was written in 1601.
Okay.
And it portrays Shakespeare as someone who's restless, like a writer whose muse inspires him with these lofty lines.
Okay.
So it's a bit more dynamic, you know, than the image of like a retired businessman, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't sound like the Shakespeare we learned about in school.
Exactly. And then there's a passage from The Malcontent, a play from 1604, that describes Shakespeare as someone whose mighty lines are worthy to be admired, but whose life is stained with some black deed.
Whoa! Stained with some black deed? That's a pretty bold statement.
Right. It doesn't exactly sound like they're talking about this mild-mannered country gentleman.
Exactly.
So these descriptions, you know, they make you wonder if the Shakespeare they were talking about was actually someone a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Someone whose life might have mirrored the dramatic twists and turns of his plays.
Right. Like there was more to him than meets the eye.
Exactly. And remember, these plays were written during Shakespeare's supposed lifetime.
Yeah, that's true.
So if he was this, like, respected figure that we believe him to be, why would these writers portray him in these, like, ambiguous, almost scandalous terms?
It's a good question.
The video suggests that these descriptions might actually be veiled references to Marlowe's hidden identity and the controversial circumstances surrounding his supposed death.
So maybe these writers knew that Shakespeare was a front for someone else.
Yeah.
Someone with a bit more edge.
Right, and maybe even a dark past.
Like a secret identity.
Yeah, it's starting to sound like a conspiracy theory.
It kind of is.
Well, some people would call it that.
Yeah.
But, you know, the video presents a compelling case.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it also points to a 1623 poem by William Bass.
Okay.
So it praises Shakespeare as a star whose light still shines brightly even though he's gone.
Okay, but that's interesting because Shakespeare supposedly died in 1616.
Right.
So could this be like, you know, a subtle hint that the true author,
Maybe.
perhaps Marlowe, was actually still alive?
It's possible.
And writing under a different name.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
And then there's a poem from 1634 by Jasper Mayne. And he refers to Shakespeare as this, like, spirit that still lives and breathes in his works.
So again, it makes you wonder if Shakespeare was more of a persona than an actual person.
Right. Maybe Shakespeare was just a mask that Marlowe was using.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. It's like these writers were trying to tell us something without explicitly saying it.
Yeah, like they were leaving clues.
Yeah, like they knew the truth about Shakespeare, but they couldn't just come out and say it.
Exactly. As if they were bound by some kind of code of silence.
Right. To protect Marlowe's secret.
Or maybe even to protect themselves.
This is getting more and more intriguing.
Yeah.
What other pieces of this puzzle does a video unearth?
So the video kind of takes a little detour into the world of Richard Tarleton.
Okay.
A famous Elizabethan clown.
Who died in 1588.
Not exactly what I was expecting in this whole Shakespearean mystery. What does a clown have to do with all of this?
So the video really focuses on these two anonymous works from 1600, Quips Upon Questions and Fool Upon Fool.
All right.
And they seem to use Tarleton's death as a metaphor for the death of, like, the wrong name.
Interesting.
Implying that someone else is actually still alive and working under a new identity.
So they're saying Tarleton's death is a stand-in for Marlowe's faked death.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Very cloak and dagger.
It really adds to the intrigue.
It does.
And it's not just these obscure works that hint at, you know, this hidden author.
Oh, okay.
The video brings up England's Parnassus.
Okay.
Which is an anthology of Elizabethan poetry from 1600.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
Now, it's known for being, like, full of errors, particularly when it comes to, like, attributing poems to the correct authors.
Okay, so a messy anthology. How does that help us solve this Marlowe mystery?
The interesting part is that it frequently mixes up the works of Shakespeare, Drayton, and Marlowe.
Really?
Sometimes it even repeats, like, identical passages from different authors, but just a few pages apart.
So it's not just typos, it's like someone deliberately jumbled their works together.
That's what the video is suggesting, yeah.
Wow.
It proposes that the compiler of England's Parnassus might have been intentionally blurring the lines between these authors, maybe to subtly hint at their shared identity.
That's a bold claim.
It is.
It would mean someone was actively trying to manipulate how these writers were perceived, even back then.
Right, and remember, we're talking about a time when print was a relatively new technology.
Right.
Whoever controlled the printing press had a lot of power
That's true.
over how information was disseminated and who got credit for what.
Yeah, it's like a real-life Elizabethan version of fake news.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so we've got suspicious timing, coded messages, handwriting analysis, a mysterious benefactor,
Right here?
and now a potentially manipulated anthology.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that points to Marlowe being the true bard?
Well, the video highlights some interesting praise for Drayton
Okay.
from other poets. So, for instance, you have these later poets like William Brown and Austin Cocaine.
Uh-huh.
And they celebrate Drayton as a giant of poetry.
Okay.
They even compare him to Ovid and Virgil.
Wow, that's high praise.
It is, but if Shakespeare was the real genius,
Right.
wouldn't they be praising him instead?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, why all the fuss over Drayton?
Right. It's a question that's, like, hard to answer with the traditional narrative.
Yeah.
But if we actually consider that Drayton might have been one of Marlowe's masks,
Okay.
then their admiration makes a lot more sense.
So they're secretly acknowledging Marlowe's brilliance through their praise of Drayton,
Exactly.
knowing that the true author couldn't be revealed.
Right. Because it was too dangerous.
So it's like a secret society of poets
Yeah, I like it.
protecting their fallen comrade.
It really speaks to the power of secrets
It does.
and the lengths that people might go to protect them,
Uh-huh.
especially in a time when free speech was not really a given.
Absolutely. It was a dangerous time to be a writer,
It was.
especially if your views didn't align with the powers that be.
Right.
But let's go back to Drayton for a second.
Okay.
We've talked about his poems.
Yeah.
But what about his plays?
Okay.
Did he write any plays that connect back to Marlowe?
There's one play in particular
Okay.
that has caught the attention of a lot of Marlovian theorists.
Uh-huh.
It's called The Merry Devil of Edmonton.
Okay.
It's this lighthearted, almost whimsical take on the Faust legend.
Faust, isn't that the guy who makes a deal with the devil?
That's him.
Didn't Marlowe write a play about that?
He did.
Yeah.
Dr. Faustus,
Right.
one of Marlowe's most famous works.
Yeah.
It's a very dark and tragic exploration of, like, ambition and the consequences of forbidden knowledge.
So we have two plays about Faust.
Right.
One by Marlowe and one potentially by Drayton.
Yeah.
What's the connection?
So the video suggests that the Merry Devil might actually be Marlowe writing as Drayton,
Okay.
but playing with his own earlier work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lighter, more comedic take on the same theme.
Oh, okay.
Almost like a playful wink
Uh-huh.
to those who are in on the secret.
So it's like Marlowe is having a little fun with us, hiding in plain sight and using his pseudonym to riff on his own masterpiece.
Yeah, pretty cheeky.
Cheeky indeed.
It adds another layer of complexity to the relationship
Yeah.
between these two playwrights, or maybe the different facets of a single multifaceted author.
It's really making you think.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've looked at Drayton,
Yeah.
Watson, Green, this mysterious Mears character,
Uh-huh.
even a mischievous clown. But is there any smoking gun, any piece of evidence that definitively proves that Marlowe was Shakespeare?
Well, the video presents a really interesting piece of evidence from a 1628 rhetoric handbook.
Okay.
It was written by a scholar named Thomas Farnaby.
Okay.
It's a pretty dry textbook,
Right.
but buried within a chapter on elocution,
Mm-hmm.
there's this curious passage that seems to directly address the Shakespeare authorship question.
Okay, a hidden clue in a dusty old textbook. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So the passage starts as a tribute to Michael Drayton,
Okay.
praising him as the divine wit.
Uh-huh.
But then Farnaby adds this line in Latin
Okay.
that translates to these I believe should be added that famous poet who takes his name from shaky, quasar, and spear, asta.
Wait, he's literally breaking down the name Shakespeare into its component parts? That's pretty blatant, isn't it?
It definitely raises some eyebrows. And remember, Farnaby's writing this more than a decade after Shakespeare's supposed death.
Right.
So if the traditional narrative is true, why would he be so cryptic?
Right, unless he knew that Shakespeare wasn't the real author
Exactly.
and was trying to subtly alert his readers to the
Yeah,
fact.
it's like he's leaving a breadcrumb trail for future generations to follow.
And we're following it.
We are.
That's so cool.
And the video goes on to explore several other 17th century texts that seem to cast doubt on the traditional Shakespeare narrative.
Okay, like what?
Well, one example is a 1644 work by George Wither called The Great Assizes Holden and Parnassus.
Oh,
It's a satirical poem that imagines a trial
a trial?
in the court of Apollo,
Okay.
the god of poetry.
Okay, a poetic trial. Sounds dramatic.
It is.
Who's on trial and what are they being accused of?
So among the accused writers are figures who the video identifies as potential Marlowe pseudonyms,
Interesting.
including Drayton
Okay.
and Shakespeare.
So it's like a meta-commentary on the whole authorship debate.
It really is.
Are there any clues within this poem that point directly to Marlowe?
Well, Wither includes a line
Okay.
where he expresses regret
Okay.
that typography, the art of printing,
Right.
was ever invented.
That's an odd thing for a writer to say.
It is, but the video suggests that Wither is actually lamenting the fact that Marlowe's true name and identity have been, obscured
Uh-huh.
by the printed word.
So he's sad that Marlowe's legacy has been buried under the name Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Sounds tragic.
It is. It really adds a layer of melancholy to this whole affair.
It does.
And it speaks to the enduring power of words, and how they can be used to both reveal and conceal the truth.
Well, this deep dive has been a real roller coaster.
It has.
We've gone from cryptic poems to handwriting analysis to a court case in the realm of poetry.
We've covered a lot of ground.
And I have to admit, some of this evidence is pretty compelling.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
What really stood out to me was the handwriting analysis.
Yeah.
If Marlowe really did write part of Sir Thomas More, that changes everything.
It really does.
And then when you combine it with all the other evidence the video presents, like the timing of Drayton's rise, the literary parallels, those potential coded messages,
Right.
those ambiguous descriptions of Shakespeare, it's hard to dismiss this theory outright.
Greg.
It's like we've stumbled upon a secret code,
Uh-huh.
a hidden language. That reveals a whole new understanding of Elizabethan literature.
I love that.
It's like we've been reading these plays and poems with one eye closed.
Yeah.
And now, thanks to this theory, we're finally able to see the full picture.
It's eye-opening.
It really is.
And who knows what other secrets are still out there.
Yeah, what other mysteries are waiting to be uncovered?
Exactly.
Well, dear listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Marlowe Shakespeare theory.
It's been quite a journey.
It has been a wild ride full of twists, turns, and more than a few surprises.
A lot to think about.
What are your thoughts on this fascinating and controversial topic?
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Do you think Marlowe might be the true author of those iconic works?
Leave us a comment.
We'd love to hear your perspective.
And remember, this deep dive is really just meant to spark your curiosity and encourage you to think critically
Right.
about the accepted narratives of history.
We're not claiming to have all the answers.
No,
There's
you-
no right or wrong answer here.
The beauty really lies in exploring the possibilities
Exactly.
and engaging with these enduring mysteries.
So keep those minds churning, and until next time, happy deep diving.